in just to give some guidance on it.
Thanks, Chair and members. No, I'll try not to prolong things. I will steadfastly try and avoid giving a view on the merits of the matter, because as I've promoted throughout the morning's proceedings, that's a matter for the committee members to determine. In terms of the process and in terms of what happens next, we are, of course, at stage 6 of the hearing process. And at this point, I would respectfully submit it doesn't really matter now what was said at Cabinet. It doesn't actually really matter what was said by any other participants this morning or what their thoughts are and opinions may be on anything now. It's a question of what the committee members' thoughts are and what your opinions are on matters. The outcome that you need to reach as a committee is one of the two set out at section 6 of the process. Either as a majority or unanimously, but as a committee, you will either agree with the decision of Cabinet and therefore advise them that there's no issue, nothing to be seen here, and it can be implemented without further delay, or the committee can agree that it doesn't agree with the decision of Cabinet and that it would be referred back to Cabinet with recommendations for alternative action as determined by the Governance and Scrutiny Committee. So what the options do is put this committee now behind the 8 ball of what happens next, and that's your decision. What I would say in order to set the context for your deliberations is that sadly it is often the case that reference was made to trust has been broken. It does need to exist, and I'm sure even those members that have only been with us for a year will already have been in receipt, because I know over 26 years I get it on a weekly basis, of communications and representations from members of the public who sadly, and I genuinely mean that, given everything we do around governance, and it's kind of in my career, but sadly don't necessarily believe and afford us the respect and the dignity that we take honest and open decisions in accordance with due process. In other words, the accusations that decisions are already a done deal, that decisions are already taken or predetermined, isn't new and isn't uncommon. And you should factor that in. The broad position is, and it's for you to decide, is that there is a CAP process, and what it's handy to know is it's been there 10 years and it has delivered over 60 transfers of assets. But that's all that's relevant, because it's each one in its own merits, and it's this one that's in front of you. The point has been made that there's been a flaw in the process, and that's an aspect of this. But as we've clarified, the process is the council's own process, call it a voluntary process as opposed to a statutory process, because the council started this activity very much before the Community Empowerment Bill came in. So you now have the Act, and the Act is a statutory process. We applied the CAP process because that's the basis in which the application was submitted. They didn't invoke the Act. So it's the right process, it's the voluntary process, and therefore it's not a question, and I don't want to say there's a process but you can just ignore it at will. However, even if the committee's satisfied that any element of any process wasn't followed, that isn't a conclusion. That's the starting of your analysis, because that failure would need to be linked to an outcome that could have been different had the failure not occurred. What you have here is a number of people who are clearly stating their opposition to this proposal. Some quoted the fact that their concern it was ex-offenders, and we've discussed and clarified the source of that, the original source of that, the fact that that was corrected in terms of the funding body's website. It was never misstated on the council's website. It was always correctly stated what the scope of the use would be. And the bottom line is that, as I say, if you believe, and that's the first matter you'd need to address as a committee member, if you believe there's been a flaw in the process, does that connect with an adverse element of the outcome? In other words, if you hadn't done it that way and we'd done it in the way you think it should have been done, would it have changed the outcome? That becomes, in the context of what you've heard today, I would submit, and it's purely advice, but I would submit that distills down to, are there in front of you, or are there, in your view, legitimate and valid grounds of objection that have been expressed that haven't been addressed through the process? Several times the question was asked, and we're not personalising this, the question was asked during the debate of what were the grounds, and I believe, and it's up to you what view you formed, but what we came back to was those that were saying it's a paper exercise and it's predetermined. you'd need to be satisfied that even the most perfect of processes would remove all such objections, and that you can competently address and prove or disprove the negative before you can actually conclude that any failure, and it's not just crossing T's and dotting I's, that any failure actually, if it hadn't happened, if you believe it did happen, if it hadn't happened, would have avoided a particular outcome. I'll stop there because precedent was referred to in terms of the CAT transfers, but there was also a reference made legitimately during the hearing to a previous episode in the life of the council, which was not a CAT transfer, but which I think I would like to cite just to help hopefully illustrate the point I'm trying to make here for the benefit of all members. And that was quite simply, reference was made earlier to an application, and that was a planning application from memory from an organisation called Turning Point that was referred to, who also work in the area of rehabilitation of addicts. And what they proposed to do in Portland Street, Portland Road, sorry, I was going to make the point, Portland along from the court, was they wanted to acquire one of the properties, and everyone will know that's mixed use business and residential. They wanted to develop one of the properties there to provide support to recovering addicts. They were quite clear at that time it wasn't handing out methadone. It was people who were beyond that. They certainly weren't still using. It was people that intended for people at the advanced stages of rehabilitation to support them with education and counselling and get them into employment, etc., etc. So that was the planning proposal. And sadly, it begat a very significant body of objections from folk. And as is always the case in a planning context, they drew and prayed in aid a whole wide range of grounds of objection, some relevant to the planning process, some not. But the reason I go back to this one is there was a recurring theme from a small rump of those objectors, which was articulated. And if anyone else knows better, then I'm sure you'll say, but everyone's familiar with an acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. And everyone's seen that in the context of planning, not in my backyard. And it's not helpful, and it doesn't really move the argument on if you can't say in whose backyard. But what we actually got through the representations in relation to the Turning Point one was Niabi, not in anyone's backyard. What you also had was people saying for that kind of proposal, put them all in Rockall. That was the response. Now, if you're of the view that the residents, the objectors here, are raising legitimate concerns, valid concerns that have been missed somewhere in the process, that aren't in any of the tables and haven't been addressed, then you may feel you come to one particular conclusion. If you're of the view that those who are quoting it's a paper exercise, it's predetermined, would not have come to accept this proposal regardless of the process followed, then you can't make that connection between any T not crossed or I not dotted and the actual outcome. So I think the committee would need to be satisfied, not just there was a flaw in the process, but that flaw in the process actually begat an unacceptable outcome. And if it hadn't occurred, there would have been a better outcome. I think you need to be satisfied, and I think the council needs to be clear that if the evidence of failure of process is simply a small number of, and you can quantify it yourself, any number of people still unhappy with a proposal in the generality rather than specific grounds, then the bottom line is what different outcome could you have procured? So it's over to you, members. It isn't just about find fault in the process, snakes and ladders, we have to start again. It's finding fault in the process if you do, and it's making that connection to the outcome and being clear that if you ask Cabinet to go back and do any of this again, what it is they've to do differently and what the expected different outcome would be. Because that's really the questions that are put to you, the options that are put to you in Section 6. You either agree with the decision or you don't, but if you don't, you're recommending alternative action that would produce, in your view, a better outcome. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. Okay, I'm going to open it up to members. So is there anybody wanting to come in? Is there anybody online wanting to come in? Councillor Hogg. Okay, Councillor Hogg, then Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Overall, I can believe that due process and diligence has been undertaken by the council officers. The mooting of a paper exercise and predetermined hasn't been clearly evidenced, or not that I can see this morning. My concern regarding this CAT transfer that has been raised is that it's going to be stigmatised, that we're not supporting mental health. And that erodes trusts in our communities, that we're not providing access at ground level to those in need. Our waiting lists in the NHS are incredibly long. And this is an absolute key aspect for people getting access to help when they need it. And nobody wants to be labelled with that stigma of mental health. And this is not what this is about. It's about people getting access on the ground to a facility and to those that can help. And as I say, I think we will erode our trust in our communities when we're being seen as not being caring and compassionate, especially when due process has been undertaken through the audit process. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Richardson, you want to come?
Just to back up what my colleague Councillor Hogg just said, I mean, if anybody doesn't know, Councillor Hogg works in the NHS and she knows exactly what she's talking about. And I just feel that we heard earlier on, if there are 1 in 4 Scots at some time in their life suffering from mental health issues, and we've got people in East Ayrshire, Kilmarnock and surrounding, that are at the early stages of things just starting to get on top of them. And if we're going to tie this up and say, oh, we can't do this because this process wasn't done right, and that process wasn't done right, and this process, we should have done that, we should have done that. This, at the end of the day, is the right thing to do. There are people out there that need this service. And if we're going to stop this service being launched, then what are we actually doing here as councillors? Because we're here to represent our communities, but we're also here to show a wee bit of leadership. This is the right thing to do. Nothing I heard this morning changes my view in that. And Jennifer's spot on.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Richardson. Does anybody else have anything to say? Is there anybody online? Okay, so
Councillor Maven.
oh, Councillor Maben.
Thank you, Chair. Our problem with this is taking the public with us and getting the support of the public and the community. I think it's crucial to it being a success. To my mind, the consultation process hasn't been good enough, and I think we need to go back and do a consultation process all over again. We need to reach out to community councils and as many people as we can. We need to do public meetings. We need to clearly explain exactly what this proposal is for and what it's going to be used for. And we need the public support or we're going to have trouble in future. So my recommendation would be to go back and do the consultation exercise all over again if possible.
Councillor Can.
I think there's in terms of the consultation, you know, we've done the consultation that we've done, and people will make their own mind up about that. But I think we need to, there's context here. Social media, we have social media now. It's all over Twitter, it's all over Facebook. The council has a process where it's open to anyone can, outside the consultation process, can contact the council. As outside of the consultation, have we had any significant correspondence from members of the public?
Sorry, Councillor Cameron, at discussion stage now, the opportunity for questions is passed. Sorry, that's the process.
Well, just my point still stands. I think that, you know, there's plenty of opportunity for people to contact the local councillors, you know, not just their ward members, but other councillors. And I think that has become a part of the consultation process, whether we like it or not. So I just think there's a context there in terms of the consultation that's actually taking place.
Councillor Watts, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. Well, I'm extremely supportive of projects like this. I mean, mental healthcare is extremely important in all of our communities. I mean, as Councillor McMahon said earlier in the earlier debate, we do have an excellent facility here in Cumnock and Netherthird. However, I do have some concerns about the consultation process within this particular application. I feel there has been a lack of consultation with the community, which could cause a wrong decision to be made, which in turn could potentially damage this CAT process or even the CAT process moving forward. So I would fully support Councillor Mayburn and suggest that as this project needs to be seen to be supported by the local community, I would suggest that moving this forward, that we recommend to Cabinet that a wider and more detailed consultation is taken place within the community to ensure that the community have indeed got support for this project. Not against projects like this, but I think we do have to be in a place where we are satisfied that the community are behind this. And I think to base the decision on 1.4% of 17,000 people, to me, that's not really that robust. So I would go with the recommendation, and I would second it, Councillor Mayburn in that decision.
You can
Chair, not to prolong things, but we are going to get into the detail here. If I understood Councillor Mayburn right, what he was moving was that the process should be repeated, that we should go back and do the consultation again. In seconding Councillor Mayburn, what you actually stated was that there should be additional consultation. In other words, it's not just repeat the process, it's repeat the process with added elements, which, as I referred to earlier, it would be helpful to specify to Cabinet what steps should be added in that were perceived to be missing in the first place. So at the moment, you've seconded Councillor Mayburn, and Councillor Mayburn may come back and clarify, and I'm trying not to be pedantic or technical, but the absolute clear outcome needs to be Cabinet being directed what it is they've been told to do, either again or differently. And at the moment, the motion from Councillor Mayburn was do it again. And seconded it, you said do it again, but with extra bits, but without specifying what the extra steps of the consultation would be. So are you able to expand on that before perhaps Councillor Mayburn comes back in? Because at the moment, I'm not sure there's an alignment between the mover and the seconder in terms of there is a substantial detail, a difference in the detail between repeat the process and repeat the process with additional elements, which would then need to be specified. Sorry, Chair.
Chair, no, I mean, I'm quite happy for the consultation to be done again. I think where I was trying to come to, David, was that we try to ensure that we do a wider range of people, so we're getting that wider range in. So, to be fair, I'm happy to go with Councillor Mayburn.
I would just say again, Chair, for the benefit of all members, that whether it's officers putting a paper in front of Cabinet, the Planning Committee, Council, or in this case, taking back the recommendation from GNS, if someone puts the work in and puts the effort in and considers something, anything, and writes the report and makes the recommendations in good faith to the best of their professional ability and says, that's what I recommend you do. And if the decision maker doesn't like some aspect of what's in front of them, then if you're going to send the author of the report away to reconsider, it's really incumbent to give them, that person or group of people, a steer on what they're expected to do differently for the outcome to be acceptable on the second occasion. If this becomes simply an exercise in repeating the consultation without any guarantee of a different outcome, the committee needs to be clear what added value or what would be achieved there by asking Cabinet to repeat a process without the clarity from this committee's decision making as to what the better or improved expected outcome would be.
Thanks, David. So we'll get Councillor Cogley, Councillor Mayburn, Councillor Lennox.
Thank you. And in my opinion here, the consultation was not carried out effectively. And I'm not happy to support the consultation and the consultation process as it is. I think I think that we could find ourselves struggling, because if it's challenged, I'm not sure that we could stand up to a challenge. And that's what I'm uncomfortable with. Now, that may or may not be right, but that's my feeling, that's my opinion. And I would feel very uncomfortable standing by the current, leave it as it is and just go back to Cabinet and say implement without further delay. I am completely unhappy with that. I think we are all absolutely behind the aims and objectives of the application, the CAT application. But it has to be supported with the right consultation process. And we can't go back to the group and say, well, we can't predetermine what the outcome of any further consultation would be. We can't do that. But what we can do is go back and say, look, please, we consult and consult properly. And, you know, to me, when we've got the leader of the council saying that he's not happy with it, Councillor Maitland saying she wasn't consulted and neither were her neighbours, to add to all the community councils and the various other people that we know weren't consulted, we need to have a proper and thorough consultation. And I didn't believe it was undertaken on this occasion. And I think that's what we should be going back to ask for.
Thanks, Councillor Cogley. Councillor Hogg, sorry I missed you. Are you wanting to come back in, or is that a legacy hand?
No, it's not legacy time. Thanks for that. As I can read it from what David was saying there, I understood that numbers responding weren't relevant in the process, or am I wrong in that? And also, the challenges that we're having also challenge or are underpinning what we do in council. So we're really challenging our internal auditing, our chief governance, our finance. We're challenging all these because the audit has shown that process was adhered to. So I'm a bit concerned about that. And I'm also slightly concerned that what we're going to do, and not taking this forward and going back again, is that we've set precedent for the future and further processes with other applications. Would this be the case as well?
The chair, it was suggested from the floor that there was a 30% threshold for support below which a CAT wouldn't go ahead, and it was clarified by officers there's no such threshold. What happens is the consultation takes place, all representations received are considered by the CAT officer group to inform a recommendation to Cabinet, not a decision, and that's the process that was followed here. I would rather steer clear of the one in relation to audit, but I think the factual position is, you've heard from Ailey, members of the committee are entitled to put weight in that in terms of what Ailey spoke to as her review of the process after the matter had been to Cabinet more recently. So it's up to members whether they accept the assurance or whether they have formed their own view. And I would hope, as the code requires, that even where there are differences of opinion between members and officers, they're conducted in a respectful manner. And it's not a question of impugning anyone else's judgment if someone comes to an alternative view. I won't say what I normally say about opinions at that point, but we are in formal session. So in the other matter, I would say we're not setting a precedent because, one, if the outcome of this here or at Cabinet, because as members will be aware, the final decision will be by Cabinet whether or not to accept any recommendation here, and that's the process Council approved 16 years ago. What I would expect to happen if the outcome is overall refusal or a declinature to grant the lease would be the group to come back in under the Community Empowerment Act, where there is a more tight statutory process where there is a statutory right of appeal, both to an internal committee members, well, those who were here before last May will recall we had one previously under the Community Empowerment Act, and we went to the internal appeal, but the matter was resolved at that stage, so it didn't then go on. But under the Community Empowerment Act, if having had a negative decision from the council and that's not overturned on the internal appeal, you then have a right of review by Scottish ministers. So I actually think what would happen here would be, firstly, it's each one in its own merits. I wouldn't see this as, just as we said, the 60 other successful don't necessarily set a precedent to this one, and vice versa. I think what would actually happen here is there would be a fresh process, but that would be against the backdrop of the council having refused it under the voluntary process before we get to the statutory process. But I think in this particular one, it wouldn't come back as a CAT transfer, because I think the group may well be minded, and I haven't spoken to them, and I wouldn't even expect me to, but the group may well take the view that if this does lead to refusal on this occasion, they come back in under the Act, where there's a clearer, not a clearer process, but there's a statutory process with those two rights of appeal. So I think if it came back, it would come back in a different form, is what I'm trying to say.
Thanks very much for that. I've also just a point here that was raised, that the leader was not in agreement with this. In Cabinet papers, he was fully in agreement with the CAT transfer. So I just want to put that one straight. Thank you.
I think just for the record that clearly it's in the minute from Cabinet that the leader voted in support of the recommendation at Cabinet. Clearly, as has been identified, there was a 2-year lead up to that, and I think it's clear, well, it is the case that there was communication about the process during the time of the process, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not so much about what one member decided, but I know folk will pray that in aid, but ultimately the leader's last position in this is as per the minute of Cabinet on 18th of January, where he voted in support of the application, having previously, I believe, addressed his concerns about the process with officers over a year before.
Okay, I'll just come in. I think there's been an underlying issue with communication between the trust, between the council and what's been put out in the community. I'm looking at 3 separate pieces of papers, and when I go back to the tweaked version, we'll call it the tweaked version of what was put on the Heritage Foundation page, it's different words, different jargon that's used to what's put in our Cabinet papers as to what's also been put on the East Ayrshire Council consultation document. Consultation document states for mental health and people who have had suicidal thoughts. Now that's the only piece of communication that has suicidal thoughts stated within that paper. And I'm not a professional in mental health, so I would not know where to place any suicidal thoughts or tendencies within the low to moderate mental health scale. And there's nobody in this chamber with that profession either. I look at my Cabinet paper and it doesn't mention suicide, so you could take the view that people, when they read the 3 different pieces of communication, they're thinking, what the hang is going to be happening in this cabin, despite what's displayed within the council's website and what their statement is going to be. There are still pieces of information, in my opinion, that is slightly different to each other. So I think communication is maybe being a problem in trying to, get our message across to the community that actually what is going to be happening within the old man's cabin when the trust take it over. So that is a concern for me. So I mean, how do we go forward when we have 3 pieces of information on 3 different separate things that's slightly different? So we need to tie all of that up and really go forward with the one accurate piece of information to let communities know exactly what is happening. And that is, it's unfortunate, but it's there, and I think we need to just absolutely tie that up. And that's my opinion. Okay, so I am now going to Councillor Lennox.
Just for
Councillor Lennox.
just for clarification, I'm a registered nurse and I spent a lot of time in acute psychiatry. I find that suicidal thoughts without intervention become suicidal actions.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Lennox.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me. I'm just a bit concerned that if this does get rejected and needs to go back to Cabinet, then for further consultation and as has been recommended, I think we're just going to come back to the very same outcome in terms of the objections that have been raised. I think we need to take account of the fact that there are many, many more people who haven't made any representations that live in the community. And you've got to assume, based on my experience working with communities, that silence is acceptance. So you've got to assume that there's a lot of support in the communities for this initiative. But I'd just be concerned that by rejecting it, folk are looking for a different outcome. And I think everybody in the room has stated and online has stated that they do support the objectives of this particular CAT transfer. So I'm just concerned that folk are underhandedly trying to look for a different outcome in terms of the location, because that's been mentioned on a regular basis about it's not the right place. So is this a case of it's not in my backyard, or do we really think that it hasn't been, the consultation process hasn't been done properly? The consultation process, to my mind, and in the view of the audits that was taking place, was done properly. It may not have been done 100% properly, but it was robust, I think, as has been stated. And I don't think if we go through this whole process again, there will be any other outcome other than the one that's been recommended by Cabinet. So I'm quite happy to go with the Cabinet's recommendation in that respect. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lennox. Councillor.
Chair, Lillian, with all due respect, I take the point you made about the three different sources of information out there and what have you, online and in different websites. But that was the point I was trying to make in my last question before we broke for lunch to Councillor Adams. We're in an age of the World Wide Web, Lillian, and people, when there's any issue, and it's this one we're talking about today, if somebody's interested in this issue, they'll go onto the web and they'll be able to see all of these sources of information. But I still have belief in the public. I don't think we've lost the trust of the public, and I still believe in the public. And I think if you're interested in this and you actually go and do your research online, you take on board those three bits of information you're talking about, you then come to the East Ayrshire Council website, and I'd like to think that 98.5% didn't respond. Well, hopefully some of that 98.5% looked into this, and when they looked at all the sources of information, they thought, yeah, this is a good idea. And you know why I know that is why I'm pretty sure that's the case. But as you well know, the Daily Record and other people have publicised this issue on Facebook and other websites. I've commented on the Facebook Daily Record article, I think, and I read the comments for the public. When I read it, it was about 20 comments. I'd say about 18 of the comments were saying, this is a great thing to do. What are the council doing? Why are they slowing it up? And it's back to Beverly's point there. Suicidal thoughts become suicidal actions. So if we tie this up in process and we do the consultation again and we take it back to Cabinet, and eventually the Howard Park facility becomes available. That's another year or whatever when something really terrible could happen. So why are we going to tie this up in process when everybody in this chamber today and online has basically said this is a good thing to do, it's just the process. Well, let's put the process to the side and do the best for the people of Kilmarnock and surrounding.
Thanks. Just to come in, Councillor Richardson. So the pieces of information that I'm looking for are from your cabinet papers. So that's East Ayrshire Council, and it's an East Ayrshire Council document. There's the other piece which is slightly different, and then the tweaked version, which was from the trust too on the architectural heritage one. So it's no as if I'm taking from sources that I wouldn't trust. So I'm just pointing out that communication could perhaps have been better laid out in the same language between the trust and the council all the way through, so that we're consistent, we're sending that message, and it's no mixed messages, it's no ex-offenders, it's people with low to moderate health. It's that was my point I was raising, but I take your point.
Lillian, in this committee, I've got full respect for you. And I take your point on
Appreciate
board.
that. I appreciate that.
I'm just saying that is that a good enough reason to delay things?
No, and just in your other point, I mean, as we said at the beginning, call-in process is a natural process on the back of any cabinet meeting, so it's not a delay, and it's not I don't know if you're trying to say it's a tactic. You know, this is a natural process, and it's a healthy process, I believe, in any decisions that's taken at cabinet.
To fair to Councillor Richardson, Chair, we've come this close, so and the fallout now. I think all Councillor Richardson was suggesting, to be fair to you, was that further delay from repeating the consultation process rather than this being delayed, this process. I don't think that.
So we've got Councillor Cogley, Councillor Hogg, and then Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Is it, you know, sort of taking on board everything that everybody's saying, and we are all clearly ad idem on so much of this. Is there some way that we can move forward in some sort of compromise whereby we look at the methods of communication?
I suppose, Chair, for consideration of the committee and some discussion with yourself earlier, there would be two issues. One is there a need to clearly make a statement, depending on the outcome here, of what this is, and try and set, not redraw, but set the baseline and make the statement now, this is what it will be, and this is how any creep would be avoided. In terms of increased use over time, should it be agreed and should it take place, or whether it's look at the process in the round, and either or both are options. But before either this committee or cabinet starts commissioning anyone reviewing the process, I think there would need to be, and maybe in the view of members there is, but there would need to be, I think, clearly identified flaws or failures before folk are sent to just generally review a process in the round in terms of looking at the process. So depending on the outcome, it would be possible, for instance, the leader of cabinet, the chair of GNS, to issue a joint statement to the general public to get that clarity and consistency of message. This is what we have approved and this is what it will be, if that's the outcome. So that's one option. And another option would be to deal with this and then have a look at the process. But I think in that regard, it's already in the audit plan for the current year as part of the normal arrangements in the 5-year programme. So you can either take comfort that the audit service will be looking at the CAP process, but that's not to negate the option that GNS can always shine the spotlight of scrutiny wherever you choose to do so. So if the committee wanted to look at that, you could. But again, before we either kick the can down the road or take what might seem the easy option, before anyone agrees to go and look at something, I think there would need to be that clarity and consistency of what it is we're looking for, what is the improvements that's looking to be made. Otherwise it becomes a bit more of an empty exercise. So it comes back to, if there is no majority agreement with the cabinet decision, what exactly is this committee asking cabinet to do better or differently if that is the outcome? So in short, you could have the, if it goes back and it's upheld, then you could have a joint statement on behalf of the council in the name of the leader and the chair to bring the two parts of this process together, the decision and the outcome from Colin, and get to this is what it is going forward. None of us can go back in a time machine and change anything of what's been out there in the past, but it could be addressed by having a clear and concise statement of what it is this council believes it's approved and what it will continue to manage. And the leader touched on that, the additional recommendation that was put into the minute in terms of just reinforcing that the lease, obviously, if it were granted, would be for a specific purpose, and to address any concerns that might grow informally, casually over time, then it was brought back to the lease will be for the purpose, and any variation or increased use or change in use would require the council's consent as landlord. So that protection was put, and that can be reinforced. But the bottom line is that there is that opportunity if it went back in a positive way. Obviously, if it's come back from this committee to say and do it again, then there wouldn't be the opportunity, it wouldn't be the right time to try and address that consistency of message if Cabinet are still to take then that recommendation and decide what to do with it. So it depends on the circumstances, sorry.
Okay, thanks, David. So Councillor Hogg, Councillor Watts.
Hi there. I'm just a bit concerned that it's becoming more of a discussion around about mental health and stigma rather than the process itself. And I think we could start to erode the trust that or damage to our reputation within council and within our officers, because they have been proven to have carried out a robust review of this CAT transfer. Our waiting lists are up to 90 weeks in the NHS for some aspects of mental health care. And here we are with a disused building sitting in an area of Kilmarnock that needs developed, that needs help, with a walk-in cafe with counselling and availability to help people who may be lonely, who may be suffering from the effects of long COVID, etc. So I'm really concerned that we are not fixating on the actual process, but we're fixating on the actual, what the usage will be of the customer per se. And I think we're in danger of eroding, as I say, our trust, both in our council colleagues and also with the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Watts? Is he not? Councillor Watts? No. No. Wait. Councillor Maben?
I think in terms of process mistakes, I don't agree with my colleague that it was robust enough. We have a website that was altered that the public were looking at and probably wondering what's going on there. We had a public meeting in a room that wasn't big enough, where 54 of the people who objected to it weren't invited to that public meeting or didn't know about it. There's people at it couldn't hear properly what was going on. And we have community councils who didn't contribute to the consultation process or didn't know about it. With parent councils didn't know about it. With elected members didn't know about the consultation process. I'll stand by my recommendations. We need to repeat the consultation process. There needs to be a public meeting, a bigger public meeting that everyone can attend and hear what's going on. We need to get community councils and ask their opinion. We need parent councils at schools and ask their opinion if they want to submit an opinion to it. We need to repeat the process. We desperately need to get the public on board and have community support for this, or you're just going to cause trouble later on. We need the public support. There's a job here at education that needs to happen through consultation and public meetings. And that's my recommendation to Cabinet. We go back and try and do that. Thank you.
Councillor Canning?
Yeah, I mean, some of my colleagues, I think the process has been robust. It hasn't been perfect. I suppose two things. One is, I mean, the number of 241 has been raised a number of times about the objections, and can anyone here say that that would have been the case if objections had not been sought? You know, we're not seeking objections here. We're trying to put out information and get whether people support or object to it. I don't think that number would have been anything like, we'll never know how many objections there have been if they hadn't been sought. Personally, I don't think it would have been anything like that number. We'll never know. So that was the first point. I think the second point, you know, I just feel very depressed that I know we're talking about process, but I've already discussed process. I can't think of anywhere in Kilmarnock that's better for destigmatising. I go out for a walk in the park. Okay, I pop in, I go in for a coffee. I go in for a coffee 2 or 3 times. I don't need to go near the counselling because I'm somebody that's feels I'm stigmatised, which we have got clearly at the moment. I get confidence, I build up my confidence, and then I have a chat with a counsellor. If we're trying to destigmatise mental health in East Ayrshire, this is the way to do it, and I can't think of anywhere better. And so, can I just give me one third point? My concern about going through a multitude of concerns about going through the process again, but one which I think is very important is we need to, our role in that consultation process is to be objective. Yeah, it's to be objective. Look at the process as we're doing and come to an informed decision. I'll go back to the leader of Labour group who made the statement. The issue in this is quite simply the wrong location. Very simple. So that says to me, they're saying it's the wrong location. End of. Very simple is quite important. Can that person be objective in a rerun of this process? I don't think so. And if this process went through again, I would think that that person would need to remove themselves from the process. That's my view. That was a final point. Thanks.
And I think Councillor Canning, to be fair to Councillor Mackay, she did respond to that point as to why. She gave the reason why at the beginning of her submission.
Fine. I still stand with my point. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm listening to what folk are saying, and there is obvious support for these services to go forward and the aims and objectives of the trust. And I'm looking at one of the recommendations that was sent to, that was put to Cabinet. And I've asked David if it is possible to build something in within the recommendation regarding the vibrant communities facilitating continued dialogue, something that would then be offered to the community.
I'm just trying to.
So it's page 15, folks.
Yeah. Just this is back to the report to Cabinet on the 18th of January at page 6, which is also, the wording is also in paragraph 26. But this was your point earlier, Chair, and it maybe brings it into proper or appropriate focus. On the one hand, and it's for members to decide. One view is that the appropriate thing to do is tell Cabinet or recommend to Cabinet that the Council repeat the process in order to try and get clearer messaging, if I can paraphrase. I think what you're suggesting is that recommendation was there for vibrant communities to continue to facilitate communication, had it been granted or should it be granted or agreed between the applicant trust and local residents to encourage understanding of the proposal and to ensure residents are kept updated in the progression of the project. I suppose really it's a choice between stick or twist. It's either go back and do it again in the hope, and I have to say hope rather than reasonable expectation, that if we repeat the same process, we'll get a better outcome. Or it's accept we're at where we're at and build on that, and for this committee to actually identify, if the decision of Cabinet were to stand, what else or what should that recommendation actually encompass? What would you want to see in terms of any improved communications going forward? And really the answer to that comes from the committee, because it would obviously be legitimate for this committee to say, if that's your position, and it's for yourselves and it's probably going to go to the vote anyway, but it's a majority view we're talking about. But if the majority view was the decision can stand, but let's put a bit more meat in the bones of how we're going to try and bring, I was going to say naysayers, but I wouldn't call them that those who are opposed to this, even at this stage, with all the information that's available, then it would be, yes, it would be appropriate, and I think it would be competent and indeed appropriate for the committee members to think about what you would want the council to do if you're of the view that there's no need to repeat the process, but we do need to get clearer messaging going forward and better and more positive engagement, and what you would want to see supporting that. The recommendation as it stands was asking Cabinet, although it says approve, effectively to know what would be done by the service, but there's obviously scope, if that's what gives comfort, that perhaps it would be Cabinet rather than us as officers that would deal with that. So if it's an option to go to Cabinet and say the decision can stand, but here's what we want you to do going forward to try and compensate for what are perceived to be any issues or concerns from the position we've reached, or the other option has been put forward is go back and repeat the process. I think that's the kind of emerging options at the moment.
I think if there's a possibility that we could build into that, then it could reach to the wider community to garner support. But certainly invite all of that community, to have the dialogue with vibrant communities and the trust, the Heritage Trust, and getting the clearer messaging over in the hope that there would be community buy-in, but we're expanding it out. We're expanding it out, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
I think the point.
Does that make sense? Charlie's nodding her head. Sorry, David.
I'm sorry.
I think for me, it's just about, the issues that have been raised. It's about moving forward, and moving forward is something that I would like to do in a manner that all members of the committee can agree a way forward, and a way that would offer the community some recognition and some reassurance that we've heard their concerns. We've scrutinised governance and scrutiny today, and as a way forward, we can make a recommendation that hopefully would satisfy the community that actually what is proposed in black and white is what's going to happen, and really get behind the project and give them the trust. And in doing so, it would then hopefully help with the integration, the harmonious integration within that community, which is something that we really want, because we want it to be successful, but we need to get clear messaging out there, and we need to work with that community. David, that's my view. So I'm opening it up to my colleagues on the committee here.
I suppose, Chair, just to help you flesh that out, and we discussed, I suppose, that if the view was rather than repeat the process, let's try and mend fences, whatever phrase you want to use from here, perhaps the recommendation back to Cabinet would be that the decision itself, if that's the majority view, one option would be the decision stands, but perhaps a joint statement, be a very appropriately and carefully worded joint statement, be prepared in the name of the leader of the council as Chair of Cabinet and yourself as Chair of Governance and Scrutiny, that would try and at least start that process of setting out, to the benefit of anyone that's not yet clear on what this would be, what exactly the council has approved, what exactly and I don't mean to be negative in this, but the control is around that, which is the terms of the lease, that any change to the approved use requires the council's consent as landlord. So if anyone out there is concerned about it will start small and it will grow, the control can be demonstrated that the landlord will need to give consent to any alteration to what the initial starting point is. So mission creep can't occur without the consent of the council as landlord. And we could also build into that any other arrangements yourself and the chair considered appropriate to allow, whether it's a forum or I think the word used was I saw forum somewhere, a sounding board somewhere I saw in one version of sounding board in the page 26. Sounding board opportunities is perhaps for that statement to be made. This is what it is. That should offer everyone assurance that that's what the council's approved, not that or that or that, just this. And this is how it will be managed. And if anyone has any concerns going forward, this is how to raise them and who to raise them with, be that community councils, elected members, or yourself and the leader as the relevant chairs, without putting too much onto yourself, Chair. So that might be, if it's to the satisfaction of the majority of the committee, then that might be the way, rather than just saying everything's fine and there's no issue to be addressed. If there is a shared concern that there are people out there who are against this, whether on legitimate grounds or not, then positive engagement is the only way to address that. So I think my short answer to your, not so short answer to your question is, it could be achieved perhaps, and it's just one option, it's up to the committee if there's any greater ideas, would be a joint statement clarifying, as I said, exactly what the council has approved, exactly how it will be played out and what any controls are against creep, and exactly how anyone with any concerns about any aspect of this can raise them. And at least then it'd be a clear position statement now that offers that assurance to the majority and offers a place to go for those who remain unhappy for any reason. So maybe that would be acceptable to members. I don't know, but obviously we'll find out.
Oh, sorry,
I don't know.
Councillor Stewart.
Yep. I mean, I've listened to loads of passionate speeches all day today, and to be perfectly honest, I think this is a really good resolution to what we're looking for, and I would go with what we're talking about just now. I think everybody's got a lot of passion about what's going on. Everybody wants to see this project thrive, and I think we just need to give it our best shot. And I think this is where we are just now. And I would hope that every member in the chambers today would support that.
Yeah, and I mean, I would certainly hope, but obviously seeking views from everybody. And it would also give those who were not originally consulted, if you like, the opportunity to come in and be involved and be engaged and help develop going forward. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, David. I know the the burden of yourself and Douglas Reid and yourself, Lily, will put that burden out, but myself and my 3 colleagues beside me, we would be comfortable with the fact that what we're proposing here today could proceed, but a statement like that out to the public, that we would be more than comfortable with that.
Thanks, David. Councillor Hogg.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. My concern remains that we had a really good consultation, and not all these 240 letters were against this, from what I can see. So I think we need to make clear differentiation here that it's the stigma of mental health is what's at play here. I think we need to be clear that the building, etc., the process, the audit, etc., has shown that it was all done clearly. And I'm really concerned that it's a stigmatisation of mental health. And if we're going to put out a joint statement, that's fine. But I really want to be clear that I feel it's got into more of a discussion about not in my backyard for this, and that's disappointing for me.
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. Does anybody have anything else to wish to add? Councillor.
I think just to follow on from Councillor Hogg's comment, I think we do need to be very, very careful that it isn't seen as a further consultation, the decision's been made. But I mean, I'm confident David can deal with that yourself and others. But we guess we just need to make sure that that is not the message is that we're going ahead, and as it moves forward, we will consult. Sorry, we will work together in partnership. Yeah.
What I would be seeking is what David said, and that would be a view of sort of let's try and move forward, main fences, do what we need to do, but let's get together, move forward together, you know, with the right information. And I think then it will be a successful integration into the community. And if that doesn't work, then we have tried and we will move on. You know, and so it's not for the want of trying hard.
Just then, in terms of process, Chair, obviously, and we'll revisit in whether in light of this part of the conversation, but at the moment we do have a motion moved by Councillor Maven, seconded by Councillor Watt, which would be to recommend to Cabinet to carry out the process again. If I could be so bold, I think what you've proposed, if I can, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the committee don't take issue with the decision in terms of the grant of the lease, noting it's subject still to a petition to the court to get the sheriff's permission under the common good legislation. So that's a further step that's required anyway. And what you're proposing is, while the decision would stand, there'd be a very clear and suitably worded joint statement issued on behalf of the council, but by the leader and yourself. And we can look at the mechanics. I mean, somebody made the point it would be yourself and the leader, but I think we can look at how that's shared. And if any other members involved in this process want sight of that before it's issued, I don't know that that would need to be a problem. We can take it to sounding board, take it to group, we can do whatever, but without getting bogged down in the detail. I think what you're proposing is a clear statement that says, well, the decision has been affirmed or remains, that the council recognises that notwithstanding everything that's gone before, and I'll say it like that, notwithstanding that's gone before, there are people out there who are opposed to this, whether they're opposed to this because they understand it and still don't like it, or are opposed to this because they don't understand it. They're out there. And as a responsible authority, we would always want to try and engage with everybody in our communities and to address those concerns to the extent that we can reasonably. So what the position statement would be to offer that absolute clarity of this is what the use of the building will be under the lease. The lease will require the landlord's consent before there's any increase or change to that use. So it can't just creep. And if anyone has any concerns at any stage from here on in, it's not about repeating the consultation, Councillor Cannon. I think what's been proposed is simply giving that clear direction to anyone out there who's still not happy with this, where to make that representation and how we will receive it and what we would do about it. And the detail of that we can work up. But as a responsible authority, it addresses the concern of doing nothing and ignoring those who, right or wrong, and I'll leave it at right or wrong, are still strenuously opposed to this. So it's about managing the message going forward, creating that forum if there are ongoing concerns as this is delivered. But the proof is often in the pudding, and folk are often opposed to things, and then that opposition does tend to reduce when they see it's up and running, and it's not what they thought it was going to be, it's something else. And again, I won't even clog it up with planning committee references, but anyone on the planning committee knows that half the reports you have to plough through deal with representations that aren't relevant to the application, but we have to deal with them because the objectors raised them. So the proposal would be that the recommendation from GNS is that while the actual approval of the lease stands subject to the common good petition, that as an amendment or an improvement to, or an enhancement, sorry, of the further recommendation, that we actually flesh out that would specifically include a joint position statement by the leader and yourself that seeks to clarify what's been approved, how it will operate, and to offer what assurance we can, not just at this point in time, but going forward, that if folk aren't happy with what they think they know or what they think they're saying, here's the forum to raise it, and it can always come back to Cabinet if there are any significant concerns going forward.
Yeah.
In terms of process, Chair, I think the next question would be whether you have a seconder. Sorry, Lynn.
I'll second that.
Councillor Mabin, you had made a proposal.
What you try to suggest, I would draw it.
I think the chair's suggesting anything, Councillor Mabin. I think she's simply inviting clarification of your position. Thank you.
I'm going to stand by my proposal and keep it there and push it to a vote. It's my belief we should be consulting with the public first before this moves forward, and not the other way around. We pass it through and then we try and consult with the public afterwards. So my recommendation, I'll stand by it.
Chair, through you then, I think that's absolutely, this is all part of the process, though, and it's not to prolong things. The only thing I would say is that absolutely clear, Councillor Cannon made the same point as well, what's not been proposed is further consultation, it's further communication and positive ongoing relations, and being clear if people aren't happy with where they would put that and how it would be dealt with. But that's not to negate what you're saying. You've clarified and confirmed you would wish to go ahead with the motion, and therefore the bottom line is if no one's otherwise minded, Chair, we have a mover and a seconder, we have yourself with amendment and a seconder, and it might well be a reasonable juncture to go to the vote.
So is Councillor Watts still seconding?
So if you're happy with that, Chair and members, then just to confirm, as we're on Teams, it'll be a roll call vote, which Lynn will take. And just for absolute clarity, we have the motion by Councillor Mabin, which is to recommend to Cabinet that the process be undertaken again. Seconded by Councillor Watts. We have the amendment from Councillor Jones as Chair, which would be to refer back to Cabinet agreeing the decision to grant the lease subject to the common good petition, but to augment the further recommendation that was already approved by Cabinet to include specifically a joint statement of the Council's position and the Council's way forward here, in the name of yourself and the leader of the Chair and yourself on behalf of the Council, and between yourself and the Chair you can agree what arrangements you want to put in place for anyone else to have sight of or input to the content of the letter before it goes out.
And in relation to community engagement.
Aye, well, that's sorry,
Sorry.
sorry, I'm sitting pointing at it, but yeah, it's the same one as the community facilitate communication and local residents understanding and ensure residents are kept updated in the progression of the project, and yeah. And paragraph 26, they say the same thing, but it's a recommendation there, and basically it's to facilitate positive relations and effective communication going forward, but with a position statement as a starting point to try and give that clarity of the mission, and with members having sight of that prior to issue, if you wish.
Yeah. Just to clarify, to give the community groups that didn't have the opportunity beforehand to then get engaged.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anybody else got any other ideas or way forward? Okay. Right, David, over to yourself then. Oh, I beg your pardon, Lynn.
It does that bit and counts them.
Thank you, Chair. Members, when you hear your name, if you could confirm if you are for the motion or for the amendment. Councillor Jones.
Amendment.
Councillor Watts.
Motion.
Councillor Canning.
Amendment.
Councillor Richardson.
Amendment.
Councillor Mabin.
For the motion.
Councillor Clark.
Amendment.
Councillor Cogley.
Amendment.
Sorry, was that the motion, Councillor? Amendment, sorry, Councillor Cogley. Councillor Lennox.
Amendment.
Councillor Kyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Hogg.
Amendment, please.
And Councillor Stewart.
The amendment, please, Lynn.
Members, I can confirm that the amendment has been carried by 9 votes to 2. Thank you, Chair.
Just to confirm then, Chair, as Lynn said, it's the amendments. Your proposition will obviously need to talk to yourself and the leader and then put arrangements in place. But I think it's important that all the members involved in the process be happy and have sight on the letter that's proposed. And the letter's just also setting out the ongoing arrangements for future engagement with all the community groups as well. So that ends that item, and I think you agreed with Mr. Tuff in relation to the other item that can be continued to another committee, so members will be pleased to know that there's a little bit of time off for good behaviour, and the meeting through you, Chair, is now ended. Thank you.
Thanks very much, members, for your conduct today. It was a difficult one, and I appreciate everybody's contributions, officers, spokespersons and members alike. So thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.